Nabila Ramdani is a journalist who specialises in the Middle East and North Africa. Good morning, Nabila.
Good morning.
So who exactly was Saif al-Arab Gaddafi? What sort of practical role has he taken in his father's regime?
Well, Saif al-Arab was the youngest of Gaddafi's children. He was 29. He mainly spent most of his time studying in Germany. But of course, since the rebellion started a few months ago, he was very much involved in the family clan to defend the regime and to stand by his father. And in that respect, he played a very active role to maintain his father in place. But he mainly kept a low profile, I have to say. He, of course, didn't have the visibility of some of his other brothers, especially Saif al-Islam, who became very outspoken and very vocal against the rebels, for example.
Do you think it looks now as if NATO are actively targeting key members of Gaddafi's regime, or was this a case of his son being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, I think we have to wait to see whether or not Saif al-Arab has indeed been killed. We're hearing this from the Libyan officials for now. But whether that is the case or not, what we can say for certain is that since the beginning of the air campaign led by the UN and then by NATO, is that Gaddafi himself has very much been targeted by the Western forces. On day 2 of the conflict, his compound was already the target of air missiles. His compound was hit again a few days ago and hit again yesterday. So it's very clear that the end game for NATO now is very much the end of the Gaddafi regime, if not the end of Gaddafi himself. And this is a very worrying development, as of course this goes well beyond the remits of the UN Resolution 1973, and there is certainly no legal ground for this. It's also very clear that NATO has been backing the rebels in a very forceful manner since the beginning of their rebellion. And again, this was not the aim of the initial UN resolution. So there are reasons to be worried about how NATO is clearly going beyond the initial aim of the resolution.
It all boils down, doesn't it, to your interpretation of that resolution, which allowed NATO to take all necessary measures to protect civilians under threat of attack. I was interested, Nabila, when you said that we should, I think you were suggesting we should treat with caution reports from the Libyan authorities that Saif al-Arab has been killed. Are you suggesting that there could be propaganda reasons why this may not be quite as it seems?
Very much so. It wouldn't be the first time that the Gaddafi regime uses propaganda as a tool. The conflict is very much one on the ground, but it has also been a war of words since the beginning of the conflict. It won't be the first time since the Gaddafi regime hasn't, stuck to his words, as it were. And for example, it had offered ceasefires on numerous occasions, but never delivered on its promises. So there are reasons to believe that it might not be true. It might be a means to perhaps bring about an immediate end to NATO airstrike, or a means to bolster support for the regime. And in that respect, it has already been achieved, because the immediate reaction of pro-Gaddafi forces in Tripoli, but also in the western part of the country, was one of utter anger and determination to resist Western forces.
And if he has been killed, then presumably this is something that can be used for propaganda purposes by the Libyan regime towards other countries in the Middle East and North Africa, where clearly there's a lot of doubt about the action that NATO are taking, and this is only going to concern people more, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we have to bear in mind that the reason why NATO started its air campaign on Libya was to prevent a potential onslaught on Benghazi, and straight away the feeling is in the Arab world that there is very much a double standard in the way the West is dealing with the different regimes in the Arab world, as for example we are witnessing very clearly not a potential onslaught on civilians in Syria, but an actual massacre carried out by the Syrian regime. So one wonders why a potential threat on civilians in Benghazi led to an endless airstrike by Western forces, while an actual security crackdown, a very bloody one and an unrelenting one, is leaving Western countries very cautious about what to say and what to do about Syria.
Nabila Ramdani, thank you very much.